Hello, welcome to today's video. Grab yourself a drink and get comfy because we're going to be reviewing some books. So, I've read 5 books so far this year. I started off well, but I got kind of stuck in a couple of them, which hindered me from making much progress, but that's okay. So, it's now the middle of March, which means winter is nearly over. The weather here is not really showing that, but hopefully spring will be on the way, it's going to warm up. And yeah, so I'm gonna end winter now with a little review of the books that I read in the first couple of months of 2023. I don't know why, but my eyes keep watering. I've had this problem for a few days. I don't know if I'm ill or what. I feel fine, but yeah. So I've got here this really pretty little notebook which I've been using as a reading journal. So I've just, a little title page there, but I've also been writing some quotes I really liked from books, the themes I found interesting, that kind of thing, just to keep my mind fresh when I want to come and make a video like this. So I mentioned a couple of videos ago that I'd been reading A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway as part of the Game of Tomes book club run by 2 YouTube channels, Emmy and Carolyn Reads. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. So A Farewell to Arms is set in Italy during the First World War, and it follows an American soldier who's part of the Italian ambulance force. And yeah, he falls in love with an English nurse, so the story is a mixture of his experience in the war with other soldiers, and also there's a love story aspect of it as well. So I think the passage that really got me hooked was quite early on in the novel, where our main character is wounded in an explosion. The way he describes it, it's from a first person perspective, and he doesn't tell you exactly what happened. He explains what he feels, what he hears, what he sees, and I just think it's amazing. I ate the end of my piece of cheese and took a swallow of wine. Through the other noise I heard a cough, then came the ch 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 ch. Then there was a flash as when a blast furnace door swung open, and a roar that started white and went red and on in a rushing wind. I tried to breathe, but my breath would not come, and I felt myself rush bodily out of myself, and out and out and out, and all the time bodily in the wind. I went out swiftly, all of myself, and I knew I was dead, and that it had been a mistake to think he just died. I really love his writing. A lot of people are very critical of the relationship and the romance in the novel, but I thought it was interesting to get to explore how that would work within wartime, when you don't know if you're going to live or if you're going to die, and perhaps you're struggling to find a motivation, reason to keep going. But I think that did make the ending all the more tragic. Not going to give any big spoilers, but it doesn't end very well. The ending is quite brutal, but I'm still so glad that I read it. I think that it was meant to be like that. Some books are meant to be sad, and this is one of them. So, A Farewell to Arms was part of the Game of Tomes book club, and the second book for the book for February was Once There Was a War by John Steinbeck, and I really struggled with this one. This took me a long time to get through. I think mainly because of the style. A Farewell to Arms is a novel, whereas this is a series of war reports, and each report is 3 pages long, so it's really hard to get hooked or get into it because all the time you're just meeting completely different characters or completely different locations. I did enjoy them. I did think it was well written and some of the topics were really interesting, but it was a bit random and probably not something that I'm going to reread. So it starts off, part 1 is in England. It talks about American troops coming over on a troop ship, arriving, adjusting, and their experiences here. The second part is set in Africa, where troops are preparing to invade Italy. And the third and final part is set in Italy, describing them preparing and then beginning the invasion. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. There are some very random bits in there. A couple of passages about vegetables, about how the English destroy their vegetables and oppress them, and also about how the Italians, to show enthusiasm at being conquered, would throw vegetables at troops as well, which I just thought was quite funny. There was also a random passage on an elf, like there was this elf that magicked alcohol, I think it was whiskey, and it just seemed so out of place with the rest of the book, but I did quite enjoy it. It was like a bit of a slap in the face, like wake up and get back into it. But yeah, it was interesting. I'm glad I read it. There's no way I would have found this on my own. But yeah, not my favourite. So the second book I read this year was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Yeah, I read this in January. I think it took me about a week, which for me is quite short. Yeah, I enjoyed it. At first there was quite a lot of world building to get your head around. So Piranesi, who's our main character, lives by himself apart from one other character called the Other, in this house which is filled with just statues. It has these seas, these tidal waves that come in that he has to run away from, and yeah, I don't want to say too much about it. It's kind of a mystery, and as the novel goes on, it unravels who he is, how he got there, who the Other is, what this world is that they're in. Although even at the end, you're not quite sure what's real and what's not. But I thought it was really beautifully written. I feel like it's quite easy to get into, and it's just a world that's really interesting. You kind of want to go and visit and be there, but at the same time you don't. I really enjoyed it. I also really enjoyed reading about Piranesi's almost religious relationship with the house. I just thought that was quite interesting. And I enjoyed the themes as well. The kind of themes of lost or secret knowledge, how that was explored, as well as kind of betrayal and his relationships with other people, and trust, and yeah, kind of having your world torn apart. I thought it was really interesting. So the next book I read was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and I really enjoyed this as well. It had some really interesting characters in. Maybe not so much Dorian himself, but Lord Henry I found really interesting. So Lord Henry becomes Dorian's kind of mentor and idol, mainly teaching him that pleasure and art and beauty are to be pursued above everything else. And he kind of uses Dorian as an experiment to see what would happen if someone actually lives all that out, whilst at the same time not actually seeing the effect it's having on Dorian's soul. I don't think I realised when I first started reading it that it's very gothic in a lot of its themes, and it made me really interested to learn more about the gothic genre, some of its similarities with sci-fi, because today there's so many things to do with technology and how that impacts morality, and I think this explored that a little bit, maybe not so much as some of the other gothic novels I've read recently, like Jekyll and Hyde, Dracula. I'm really excited to read Frankenstein soon as well. So the final book I read was Surprised by Joy by C.S. Lewis, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was quite different from the C.S. Lewis books I've read previously. This could probably be described as a spiritual autobiography. He describes how, as a young boy in school, he began to lose his faith, reject Christianity, and any belief in God, and not wanting any interference in his life, to being vaguely interested in the occult at one time, but then kind of becoming very rationalistic, and yeah, then becoming a believer in God, but not really knowing who that God is, and then eventually reluctantly accepting Christianity. In the Trinity term of 1929, I gave in and admitted that God was God and knelt and prayed, perhaps that night the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England. I did not then see what is now the most shining and obvious thing, the divine humility which will accept a convert even on such terms. The prodigal son at least walked home on his own feet, but who can duly adore that love which will open the high gates to a prodigal who is brought in kicking, struggling, resentful, and darting his eyes in every direction for a chance of escape? The words compel intrare, compel them to come in, have been so abused by wicked men that we shudder at them, but properly understood, they plumb the depths of divine mercy. The hardness of God is kinder than the softness of men, and his compulsion is our liberation. I think it's great. I love C.S. Lewis. I really enjoy his work very, very much. So those were the 5 books I've read so far this year. my dinner is ready, so I should probably go, but I hope you enjoyed the video and there shall be more soon, so I hope you look forward to it and I hope you have a lovely day.